Escalation could lead us to uncontrollable and unpredictable situations that no one wants to happen. It is high time to reverse the trend and favor diplomacy, dialogue, and negotiation. Only dialogue and negotiation can lead us to a ceasefire and stop the bloodshed. Only dialogue and negotiation can bring peace and security to Ukraine, to Russia, and to the whole region. It is critical that both parties choose the path of de-escalation and engage directly or indirectly in genuine dialogue and negotiation. It is the only way to reach a mutually acceptable solution to this conflict in line with the purposes and principles of the UN Charter, taking into consideration all security concerns. Also, the international community should play a vital role in creating conditions that could facilitate dialogue between the parties to reach such a solution and to end this war. Madam President, escalation is the right path toward failure. We must change direction. Let's give diplomacy a real chance. Peace and security should be our only option, and I thank you.
I thank the representative of Algeria for their statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Sierra Leone.
Thank you, Madam President. I thank ASG Miroslav Jencha for his briefing. I welcome the participation of the representative of Ukraine in this meeting. Sierra Leone remains deeply concerned about the escalating security situation and the deteriorating humanitarian situation in a conflict which has continued for close to 3 years now. In recent months, the conflict has escalated dramatically, and the battlefield has expanded with intensified offensive operation by both parties. A week ago in this chamber, Sierra Leone took note of several news reports that restrictions on the use of long-range missiles to strike targets inside the Russian Federation have been lifted, following recent intelligence and open-source reports that the DPRK troops are now engaged in combat in the Kursk region. We stated that if these reports were confirmed, that will mark a dangerous escalation of the conflict. Today, we take note of Ukraine's letter dated 25th November 2024, stating that the Russian Federation has used a new intermediate-range missile on 21st November to attack the city of Dnipro, and also continues to carry out massive missiles and drone strikes against residential areas and critical civilian infrastructure. These actions, if confirmed, represents a dangerous escalation in the conflict. We further take note of reports from Ukraine of multiple attacks that continue to target and damage electricity and gas facilities, despite the looming winter, and also numerous civilian facilities across Ukraine. We have reiterated many times in this Council in the course of this year that the deliberate targeting of residential or civilian areas, civilian infrastructure, and essential services such as hospitals, schools, water, and energy facilities are unacceptable and prohibited under international law. It poses a significant threat to the safety and well-being of the most vulnerable and protected populations, violating the basic tenets of humanity and the principles of international humanitarian law. Sierra Leone also deems as unacceptable attacks on civilians, vital civilian infrastructure, and protected objects. We call on all involved parties to take all necessary measures to avoid further civilian casualties and damage to civilian infrastructure. Madam President, The deteriorating security situation also continues to have devastating humanitarian consequences on the civilian population. Latest updates from UN aid teams have highlighted the deepening humanitarian crisis across Ukraine, particularly in frontline areas in the northeast and south, owing to intensified attacks. OCHA has warned that civilians remaining in frontline communities in Donetsk, Kharkiv, Kherson, Dnipro, and Zaporizhia face dire living conditions, which is expected to worsen as winter approaches. Reported attacks against Ukraine's energy infrastructure have drastically reduced the country's electricity capacity, leading to daily power cuts for millions of people across Ukraine. These outages, often lasting many hours, limit access to water, mobile networks and internet, and public transportation, and disrupt children's ability to learn and even attend school remotely. As Ukraine approaches its third winter since the start of the conflict in February 2022, Sierra Leone is deeply concerned that repeated attacks on energy infrastructure are expected to exacerbate the challenges civilians will face, with likely disruption to essential services such as water, gas, and heating. We note that to address the winter-specific needs, the humanitarian community launched the 2024-2025 Winter Response Plan, appealing for $492.1 million to support 1.8 million people with critical winter-related humanitarian assistance, as outlined in the 2024 Humanitarian Needs and Response Plan. This plan intends to support timely preparedness and response. Sierra Leone calls on the international community to support this plan. The drastic escalation, alarming civilian casualties, and the devastating humanitarian consequences of the conflict on civilians, including the elderly, women, and children in Ukraine, underscores the need for this violence to end. All parties to the conflict must prioritize the protection of civilians and refrain from further escalation and pursuit of the option of winning the war on the battlefield at all costs. Dialogue and diplomacy should be the primary tools employed to pave the way for a peaceful resolution of the conflict. Let me close, Madam President, by urging all parties to prioritize the protection of civilians and critical infrastructure, including energy infrastructure, to ensure essential services for the well-being and stability of civilians. Let me also repeat what we stated last week in this chamber. Peace is achieved not among friends, but between conflicting parties. In this regard, genuine peace requires overcoming hostility, bridging divides, and fostering dialogue where mistrust and animosity have taken root. It involves compromise, reconciliation, and the willingness of both parties in the Ukraine conflict to prioritize coexistence and the greater good over their grievances or individual interests. Thus, peace is most meaningful and transformative when it is forged between those who were once adversaries, as in the case in the current conflict. Sierra Leone therefore reiterates its call for meaningful steps to be taken towards the immediate and unconditional cessation of the hostilities and for constructive and inclusive diplomatic efforts to achieve a just and lasting solution to the conflict. In taking this important step, we reiterate our call for the full respect for the sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders, as well as the Russian Federation. The legitimate concerns of all parties are to be taken into account in order to find a political and diplomatic solution as envisaged in Article 33 of the UN Charter. The international community, including this Council, must remain steadfast in its commitment to supporting the pursuit of a just and sustainable peace. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Sierra Leone for their statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of France.
Madame la Présidente, je remercie M. Ziencha pour son exposé. Il y a quelques jours, la Russie annonçait avoir frappé la région ukrainienne de Dnipro en utilisant pour la première fois un missile balistique de portée intermédiaire dit Oreshnik. Elle a accompagné cette frappe, qui a causé des dommages dans des zones civiles, de menaces à l'égard des États qui soutiennent l'Ukraine dans son droit à la légitime défense. La Russie choisit ainsi l'escalade dans la guerre d'agression illégale qu'elle a elle-même provoquée contre l'Ukraine. Aucun des prétextes allégués pour tenter de justifier celle-ci ne doit occulter cette réalité. Elle a attaqué l'Ukraine en violation de la Charte des Nations Unies. Elle prolonge cette guerre alors qu'elle pourrait y mettre un terme sans aucun préjudice pour sa sécurité, en cessant ses opérations militaires et en retirant ses troupes du territoire ukrainien, comme l'a exigé la Cour internationale de justice dès le mois de mars 2022. La Russie choisit de bafouer le droit international humanitaire pour essayer d'abattre la résistance du peuple ukrainien. Elle mène depuis de longs mois des campagnes de frappe systématiques contre les zones résidentielles et les infrastructures énergétiques ukrainiennes. Elle choisit également de mettre en péril l'architecture internationale de non-prolifération lorsqu'elle se fournit en drones, en munitions, en missiles balistiques auprès de l'Iran et en violation de résolutions du Conseil de sécurité qu'elle a pourtant soutenues auprès de la Corée du Nord. Elle accueille désormais sur son sol un déploiement de troupes nord-coréennes dont l'implication dans les combats constituerait une nouvelle escalade. Il y a dans ce conflit un agresseur, la Russie, qui n'hésite plus à violer des pans entiers du droit international et à adopter une posture d'escalade afin de poursuivre sa guerre de conquête. Et il y a un agressé, l'Ukraine, qui dispose, en vertu de la charte, du droit de défendre son indépendance et son intégrité territoriale. La France continue de se tenir aux côtés de l'Ukraine et de son peuple, y compris en leur apportant le soutien militaire qui leur permet d'exercer effectivement leur droit de légitime défense. Ce droit, rappelons-le, inclut la possibilité de frapper des sites militaires en Russie lorsque ceux-ci sont utilisés pour conduire la guerre d'agression contre l'Ukraine. Celle-ci doit être en mesure de se défendre et d'engager, lorsqu'elle le souhaitera, des négociations en vue d'une paix juste et durable. La Russie ne doit pas compter sur notre démobilisation. Laisser cette guerre atteindre son but, ce serait accepter un désordre international et la loi de la jungle où la force primerait sur le droit. Nous resterons engagés en faveur d'une paix juste et durable, conformément aux résolutions adoptées par l'Assemblée générale des Nations unies. Je vous remercie.
I thank the representative of France for their statement, and I now give the floor to the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Madam President. I also extend my gratitude to A.S. Yuchenko for his briefing. Colleagues, last week we discussed the aftermath of Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine, which has been ongoing for 1,000 days. Regrettably, today we gather once again in this chamber to address a grave development in this unprovoked war. Last week, I highlighted that Russia is undermining the international order and the global non-proliferation regime. However, recent developments over the past week are even more alarming. On November 19th, Russia announced the revision of its nuclear doctrine. This new nuclear doctrine allows for a nuclear response to aggression from a non-nuclear weapon state if supported by a nuclear weapon state, lowering the threshold for nuclear engagement. In addition, Russia launched an intermediate-range ballistic missile, IRBM, and this attack marks the first time that such systems have been used in combat. It is worrisome that Russia is dangerously blurring the lines between conventional and nuclear warfare by taking these escalatory actions. Madam President, the war in Ukraine is becoming further complicated with the DPRK's full involvement. Initially, North Korea supported Russia's invasion of Ukraine and was one of the only 5 member states that voted against the General Assembly resolution on March 2, 2022, entitled Aggression Against Ukraine, which deplored the aggression and demanded a full withdrawal of Russian forces. Starting about August last year, the DPRK has shipped about 20,000 containers to Russia. To date, it is estimated that Pyongyang has provided approximately 9.4 million artillery shells. Furthermore, North Korea has recently transferred not only munitions, but also artillery launch systems. My government estimates that around 150 units of 170 millimeter howitzers and 240 millimeter multiple rocket launchers have been delivered to Russia. About 11,000 North Korean soldiers have been dispatched to Russia, and some of them are now actively engaged in combat operations in the Kursk Oblast. While my government is investigating specific intelligence related to North Korean casualties, the estimated casualty toll remains unverified. The rapid pace of these developments makes it challenging for us to even keep up with unfolding events these days. Nevertheless, one thing is clear. All of these activities are blatant violations of multiple Security Council resolutions. Madam President, North Korea's increasing involvement in Russia's war against Ukraine carries serious implications. First, with North Korean troops and weapons on the battlefield, the conflict between Russia and Ukraine is being internationalized and evolving into a broader confrontation. Russia can now rely on additional military resources and manpower from the DPRK to bolster its operational capabilities and sustain its military efforts. In fact, we are even facing the potential for an additional deployment of North Korean troops, as more personnel may be needed to supplement and maintain existing troop levels. Second, North Korea's full participation in the war provides Pyongyang with greater access to Russian resources and military technology. In return for sending its troops, my government assesses that the DPRK has received from Russia not only economic benefits, but also anti-aircraft missiles and equipment to reinforce its weak air defense systems. The DPRK may acquire advanced military technology, material, and equipment to advance its illegal nuclear program. With Russia's direct backing, an emboldened North Korea will likely intensify pursuit of its illegal nuclear ambitions and provocative actions, thus further destabilizing the Korean Peninsula and beyond. Third, we are currently witnessing an ominous collusion. A permanent member of the UN Security Council, with its top-tier military technology and lowered nuclear threshold, is collaborating with an impoverished and isolated regime, well known for brutally oppressing its own people. The leader of the regime is sending soldiers into distant battlefields to be used for Russia's reckless tactics, while siphoning off their salaries from Russia into the regime and funding illegal WMD development. Such a collusion, if unchecked, could profoundly shake the foundation of the international order based on the UN Charter. The international community should stand united in condemning such collusion and calling for an immediate halt to the illegal cooperation. Madam President, to conclude, the Republic of Korea once again urges Russia and North Korea to cease their military cooperation and immediately withdraw their troops. We also take this opportunity to reaffirm our steadfast position to support Ukraine's defending its people and territory in accordance with the UN Charter and international law. For our part, we will respond resolutely to any threats to our national security in cooperation with the international community, and will take corresponding measures depending on ensuing developments related to Russia-DPRK military cooperation. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of the Republic of Korea for their statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Ecuador.
Gracias, Presidenta, y agradezco al subsecretario Yencha por su detallado informe. A más de 1000 días del inicio de la invasión a Ucrania, nos enfrentamos a un escenario que ha adquirido una nueva dimensión. La constante escalada de la violencia y el uso de armamento cada vez más devastador amenaza con llevarnos a un punto de no retorno, generando un clima de incertidumbre y temor que resuena a nivel global. Hace apenas 9 días, la secretaria general adjunta Di Carlo recordó a este Consejo sobre las devastadoras consecuencias de la guerra. Más de 12,000 civiles han perdido la vida, incluidos más de 600 niños. Ciudades enteras han sido reducidas a escombros, la infraestructura civil, incluidas más de 1,300 escuelas y 580 instalaciones médicas, han sido sistemáticamente destruidas. Ucrania se ha convertido en uno de los lugares más minados del mundo, con casi una cuarta parte de su territorio contaminados por minas. La amenaza de un invierno devastador agravada por la destrucción de infraestructuras críticas y el ataque continuo contra la red energética de Ucrania pone en riesgo a millones de personas que dependen de ayuda humanitaria para sobrevivir. Además, el creciente peligro de un incidente nuclear en zonas como Zaporilla subraya la gravedad de la situación. Presidenta, colegas, mientras continúe la guerra, persistirán las necesidades humanitarias. El invierno trae nuevos retos. La comunidad internacional debe redoblar sus esfuerzos para garantizar una respuesta humanitaria sostenida y coordinada que priorice a quienes se encuentran en las comunidades de primera línea y en las zonas aledañas. Esto incluye el fortalecimiento de los servicios esenciales como la salud mental, así como el apoyo jurídico y psicosocial para las víctimas, especialmente los niños y mujeres que han sufrido traumas irreparables. Mientras se alcanza la paz, las partes deben cumplir estrictamente con las normas del derecho internacional, incluyendo el derecho internacional humanitario, lo que incluye su obligación de proteger a la población civil y observar de manera rigurosa los principios fundamentales de distinción, proporcionalidad y precaución. Presidenta, no podemos subestimar los riesgos que supone una mayor escalada del conflicto y sus implicaciones para la seguridad internacional. Las partes deben actuar con responsabilidad y contención, evitando cualquier acción que nos ponga al borde de una confrontación más amplia. Por ello, resulta preocupante la movilización de miles de soldados de la República Popular Democrática de Corea hacia la zona de conflicto y su potencial participación en las hostilidades. De igual forma, la utilización de armamento que pueda exacerbar la situación debe evitarse. Ha llegado el momento de detener la violencia y la destrucción. Los ciudadanos ucranianos y rusos merecen vivir en paz. El mundo no puede permitirse un conflicto de mayores proporciones. La comunidad internacional debe redoblar esfuerzos para generar las condiciones propicias que permitan retomar el diálogo y alcanzar un cese al fuego inmediato. Como mencioné hace una semana, desde febrero de 2022, este Consejo ha celebrado alrededor de 100 de reuniones formales en formato abierto, las cuales nos han permitido expresar nuestras posturas. Es momento de que exploremos todas las herramientas y modalidades disponibles para evitar que este foro se convierta en una caja de resonancia donde las palabras se repiten sin traducirse en acciones concretas para restaurar la paz. Durante este debate ha surgido un denominador común en las intervenciones. Primero, la necesidad de respetar de manera irrestricta los principios consagrados en el derecho internacional y en la Carta de las Naciones Unidas. Y segundo, el imperativo de fomentar una desescalada ante los riesgos que plantea este conflicto. El Ecuador coincide plenamente con estos llamados y reafirma su apoyo a la soberanía, integridad territorial e independencia política de Ucrania, así como su disposición por respaldar cualquier iniciativa que permita avanzar hacia una solución negociada que conduzca a una paz justa y sostenible basada en el derecho internacional y los principios de la Carta de la ONU. Gracias, Presidenta.
I thank the representative of Ecuador for their statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the representative of the United Kingdom. I'd like to start by thanking ASD Yencha for his briefing today. Colleagues, last week we marked 1,000 days since Russia launched its illegal, full-scale invasion of Ukraine. We recalled the devastating impact the war has had upon the Ukrainian people and the world, and reiterated our steadfast commitment to ensuring Ukraine gets the support it needs to defend itself and to achieve a just and lasting peace in line with the UN Charter. President Putin has demonstrated time and again that he has no interest in such a peace. In recent weeks and months, Russia has intensified its attacks on Ukraine. First, it has stepped up the use of indiscriminate glide bombs against Ukrainian cities. Last week, the UN announced that the number of civilians killed since February 2022 had reached over 10,000, with over 18,500 injured. Second, Russia has intensified its deliberate targeting of civilian energy infrastructure. This is a war crime, and it puts the lives of millions of Ukrainians at serious risk during cold winter months. Third, Russia has used experimental weapons. Last week, it fired an intermediate-range ballistic missile on Dnipro. Ukraine is not a testing ground for new weapons. I could go on, but this pattern of reckless activity by Russia serves only to prolong the war and the suffering of Ukrainian people, whilst posing serious risks to international peace and security. There is only one aggressor here and only one country in breach of the Charter. To seek de-escalation, we must focus on deterring Russia from that aggression. No one wants peace more than Ukraine. But Ukraine needs to be able to defend its civilians from these brutal attacks. Ukraine has a right to self-defense under Article 51 of the UN Charter, and we will support them in their efforts to achieve a sustainable peace. I resume my function as President of the Council. I now give the floor to the representative of Ukraine.
Well, thank you, Madam President. Distinguished members of the Security Council, Assistant Secretary General Yencha, I also recognize here the residual presence of Putin's envoys in the permanent seat of the Soviet Union. I would like to thank the Ukraine presidency for convening this meeting that Ukraine requested in response to Russia's recent escalatory actions. These include the first use of an intermediate-range ballistic missile to strike the Ukrainian city of Dnipro and the use of DPRK troops in its war against Ukraine. The ongoing deployment of DPRK troops to support Russia remains one of the clearest indicators of Moscow's unwillingness to de-escalate, alongside the weapons supplies Russia has been receiving from Pyongyang for over a year. Since the Council's most recent discussion, the situation on the ground has escalated, and first clashes of the Ukrainian forces against DPRK servicemen already took place. As we informed earlier, the troops are fighting under assumed identities of Russia's Far East nationalities using forged documents. Primarily, they operate as combined arms units trained for action in the European theater of military operations. The DPRK is now entering the war in a fully fledged manner. According to available information, its current military contingent of 11,000 troops could quickly be increased to 100,000. The question of whether the Pyongyang regime truly requires such a substantial number of combat-trained servicemen solely to assist its Russian allies is rhetorical at best. The answer to this question is self-evident, and while it may be uncomfortable, acknowledging this reality is essential. Otherwise, an appropriate and adequate response would be unlikely. According to the publicly available information, the DPRK had sent more than 20,000 containers of artillery, missiles, and other conventional arms to Russia since August 2023 to replenish its dwindling weapons stockpiles. As reported by Ukraine's military defense intelligence, Pyongyang has supplied Moscow with 100 Can-23 and Can-24 short-range ballistic missiles. The first use of these weapons by Russia against Ukraine, including against residential areas and civilian infrastructure, was recorded at the end of 2023. In 2024, Ukraine has documented approximately 60 launches of such missiles, according for 1/3 of all ballistic missile attacks carried out by Russia this year. Furthermore, recent reports from the expert community point to satellite images that reveal the DPRK is expanding a manufacturing complex in the city of Khamkhun. This industrial facility assembles Kn-23 short-range ballistic missiles, which Russia has used against Ukraine, including for targeting residential areas and civilian infrastructure. The satellite images reportedly taken in early October show the construction of what appears to be an additional assembly building, as well as a new housing facility likely intended for workers. Additionally, there have been recent reports that Russia received 170mm self-propelled howitzers and 240mm multiple rocket launch systems from the DPRK. Let me recall that the transfer of ballistic missiles, along with any other arms and related material from the DPRK to Russia, flagrantly violates multiple United Nations Security Council resolutions. The training by the Russian Federation of DPRK regular units, including those recently deployed in the Kursk region, constitutes a violation of Security Council Resolutions 1718, 1874, and 2270. In turn, DPRK soldiers providing or receiving any training or other assistance related to use of arms is also a violation of the mentioned resolutions. We reiterate that Pyongyang support comes at a price, and this is an access to Russian technology in missile, nuclear, and other military programs. It is crucial to understand that this price is paid not so much by Russia, but by the world. Failure to act decisively will be far more costly in the long run than taking strong and timely measures today. We call on all responsible nations to take immediate actions to resolutely counterattack the Russian and North Korean regimes, from increasing sanctions pressure on Moscow and Pyongyang to maximizing Ukraine's capabilities within the framework of the victory plan presented by President Zelensky. At the same time, the Security Council and its 1718 Sanctions Committee should continue addressing the issue of non-compliance of the DPRK and the Russian Federation with relevant UN Security Council resolutions. In this regard, Ukraine also supports the monitoring and reporting on violations and evasions of the sanction measures by both regimes within other multilateral mechanism, in particular multilateral sanctions monitoring team established on October 16, 2024. Madam President, another escalatory move by Putin aimed at testing the world's resilience to Russia's nuclear blackmail occurred on November 21. On that day, the Ukrainian city of Dnipro suffered an attack by an intermediate-range ballistic missile capable of delivering weapons of mass destruction. According to an initial examination of remnants, it was the first time that such a missile has been identified on the territory of Ukraine. The missile was equipped with 6 warheads, each containing 6 sub-munitions. It moved along a ballistic trajectory which was only affected by aerodynamic resistance. Moscow's narratives following the strike, including comments by war criminal Putin, once again underscored Russia's intentions to persuade the global audience of its complete inadequacy, this time by showing readiness to kill Ukrainians not only with conventional, but also nuclear means. Ukraine calls on UN member states, in particular nuclear weapon states, to condemn Russia's irresponsible nuclear saber-rattling. In responding to this escalatory step, it is also important to remember that Putin's future actions will directly depend on the strength and resolve of our reaction. In effect, this modus operandi has always been simple and straightforward. If his blackmail succeeds and his opponent shows weakness or willingness to appease, a new and more severe escalation of violence and violations will inevitably follow. On the contrary, if adequate measures to deter Russia and reduce its aggressive potential are taken, Putin will stop. Therefore, the response to the Kremlin's current nuclear blackmail and threats must include tougher sanctions and increased military assistance to the party defending itself, its people, and the principles of the UN Charter. In this context, we do not accept concerns about strengthening Ukraine's capacities to strike military targets on Russian territory as alleged escalation. Such labeling either demonstrates a complete misunderstanding of conflict's nature and current developments on the ground, or serves as manipulation in the aggressor's interests. It was from Russian territory that the full-scale invasion began in February 2022. It is on Russian territory that new military units were being formed to occupy and destroy Ukrainian cities and kill Ukrainian people. It is on Russian territory that the production of deadly weapons is accelerating, weapons that will be used not only against Ukraine, despite the illusions of those hoping to buy a few years of peace at the expense of Ukraine's existence. Finally, it is from Russian territory that missiles, drones, and guided aerial bombs are launched daily, killing Ukrainians and destroying our critical infrastructure. This includes drones from Iran and missiles from the DPRK, enabling these rogue states to test their weaponry. More than 11,500 missiles were launched against Ukraine since February 2022. More than 33,000 guided aerial bombs were deployed. Over the past 4 days alone, 495 UAVs were launched by Russia, along with Iskander ballistic missiles and KH-5969 guided air-to-surface missiles. Among the targets that Russian forces attempt to strike are the transmission substations of our nuclear power plants. Following the Russian attack on November 17, the IAEA Director General stated that several electrical substations on which the NPPs depend had suffered further damage. In addition, the main power lines from 4 of the substations were disconnected. This poses a real and immediate threat to nuclear safety and security, not only for Ukraine, but for the entire continent. Strikes on Russian territory help reducing such war-related threats. Unlike Russia, Ukraine does not target residential areas, hospitals, or civilian infrastructure. Our goal is not to intimidate the Russian civilian population, but to weaken the ability of the Kremlin regime to threaten Ukraine and the world. Russian military command posts, airfields, artillery arsenals, missile deployment sites were among the most recent targets hit by the Ukrainian forces. Every target struck means a Ukrainian life saved, somebody's home or power station preserved. Ukraine will continue to exercise its inherent right to self-defense under Article 51 of the UN Charter. This right, I remind you, does not impose geographical limitations on defending against an armed attack. At the same time, Article 51 does not allow an aggressor to hide its violations under the guise of the right to self-defense, as self-defense applies in cases where an armed attack occurs or is imminent. In February 2022, as we all remember, the qualification of imminent was only applied to Russia's plans to invade Ukraine. The plans that Russia denied in this very chamber a week before the invasion at the level of its deputy foreign minister. Russia must understand that its every attempt to expand the war will have consequences. This serves to sober the aggressor state, disrupts its plans, and enforce it toward peace. A comprehensive, just, and lasting peace based on the UN Charter, not on deceitful appeasement reminiscent of Munich 1938. The former could be achieved through two things: helping Ukraine and increasing pressure on Russia, and if the latter prevails, the price for all of us would be far too high. One speaker today has said that he cannot help but wonder, can those caught in the war be reunited with their families? Is there anyone they can be thankful for? Can they have a happy and peaceful tomorrow? End of quote. The answer is yes. There are 141 countries in the General Assembly they can be thankful for. The countries who voted for the condemnation of the Russian aggression in March 2022. The answer is yes. There are 141 countries they can be thankful for who call a spade, who voted in February 2023 for the resolution on the principles of the UN Charter underlying just, comprehensive, and lasting peace in Ukraine, including Ukraine's territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders. Yes, they can be thankful to dozens of countries that help Ukraine with air defense systems, with means to destroy military bases in Russia, where hundreds of missiles are launched to kill Ukrainian children, women, and men. And I want to conclude with my profound gratitude to all those countries that have been supporting Ukraine through almost 3 years of this bloody war. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Ukraine for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Poland.
Madam President, I would like to thank ASG Mirosław Jęcia for his briefing. As it was mentioned just last week, we gathered in this council to mark the milestone of the 1,000 days since Russia's unprovoked and brutal invasion of Ukraine. This sobering anniversary should have served as a wake-up call to the international community. Yet, Russia, undeterred, has chosen to escalate the conflict further, demonstrating a blatant disregard for international law and human life. Furthermore, Russia's increasingly active support from other states is transforming this war into a collective act of aggression. Madam President, Russia has intensified its aggression against Ukraine through a combination of verbal threats and military actions. The recent attacks against Dnipro on the November 21st, targeting Ukrainian civilians and civilian infrastructure with the use of the modified RS-26 Rubesh intermediate-range ballistic missiles Oreshnik, capable of carrying nuclear warheads, represents a new level of danger in the conflict with Ukraine. This move, coupled with the revision of Russia's nuclear doctrine, constitutes another instance of nuclear saber-rattling, further undermining the global security architecture. Such behavior not only threatens the stability of Ukraine and the region, but also increases the risk of wider conflict and nuclear proliferation. The Kremlin's aim is clear: to intimidate Ukraine and its supporters and sway public opinion to deter international support, but this will not happen. The international community must send a clear message to Russia: its nuclear threats will not be tolerated. Poland strongly opposes and deplores such reckless actions, calling on Russia to cease its aggression, withdraw its troops from internationally recognized territory of Ukraine, and return to the path of diplomacy. We reiterate that Ukraine's defensive operations to diminish Russia's capacity to wage its illegal war are a legitimate exercise of an inherent right to self-defense, fully in line with the international law and Article 51 of the UN Charter. In contrast, Russia, as an aggressor, continues to violate fundamental principles of international law, including the prohibition of the use of force against the territorial integrity and sovereignty of any state and international humanitarian law. Russian authorities and soldiers must be held accountable for all crimes committed in Ukraine. If they go unpunished by international justice, aggressive Moscow could inspire other actors to replace international law with the might makes right approach. This could lead to a world where coercion and intimidation replace peaceful negotiations and time-consuming reconciliation in every region. Madam President, any further peace must be grounded on the UN Charter and international law and must be negotiated and agreed upon by Ukraine. We believe that the President Zelensky's peace formula currently best embodies these principles, and I thank you.
I thank the representative of Poland for their statement, and I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Stavros Lambrinidis, Head of the Delegation of the European Union to the United Nations.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. I have the honor to speak on behalf of the European Union and its member states. I want to thank you for organizing this meeting, and also special thanks to Jerzy Janša for his briefing. Colleagues, only last week we marked 1,000 days since Russia's unprovoked and unjustified full-scale invasion of Ukraine. I delivered a statement at that occasion in front of this chamber on behalf of the EU and its member states again. And today we are compelled to meet once again after Russia once again stepped up its offensive with a new wave of escalations. The past days, Russia has intensified its massive aerial assaults against Ukrainian cities, once again killing innocent civilians, including children. It has once again inflicted further damage on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, also endangering nuclear safety and security, as nuclear sites need a secure off-site power supply. It has once again expanded its use of arms, firing a new ballistic missile against Dnipro. And it has once again deepened its military cooperation with the DPRK, now deploying thousands of North Korean troops to support its war of aggression in violation of UNSC resolutions. Dear colleagues, each of these actions separately constitute once again unacceptable escalations and serious breaches of international law. Russia must be held fully accountable for its violations. The world counts on all Council members to defend international law, to seize any and all assistance to Russia's war of aggression, and to assist Ukraine in achieving a just, lasting, and comprehensive peace. Might cannot make right. We can never accept attempts to change borders by force. Territorial integrity is at the core of the UN Charter and it must be upheld. So, once again, we will continue to support Ukraine to defend the UN Charter in response to Russia's aggression, and we will do so for as long as it takes. Thank you.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Lambrinidis for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Estonia.
Thank you. Thank you very much, President. I have the honor to speak on behalf of the three Baltic states, Latvia, Lithuania, and my own country, Estonia. We align ourselves with a statement of the European Union. Let me add a few additional elements. First of all, I would like to thank SG Jenscha for his briefing. Thank you. President, criminal Russia's regime, instead of opting to de-escalate and to end this war, it calls and to call of the international community to find a peaceful end to this war, has again decided to pursue escalation in Ukraine, exemplified by Russia's launching a record amount of drone strikes into Ukraine during the past days, in which energy infrastructure, including of the nuclear power plants infrastructure, in several regions was seriously hit. Moreover, last Thursday, Kremlin fired an intermediate-range ballistic missile in the city of Dnipro, with a warning that more would follow. While Russia's nuclear saber-rattling is unfortunately nothing new, firing experimental missiles with capability of carrying nuclear warheads at another member state is an irresponsible and deeply concerning development. Let me be clear. Such desperate attempts of intimidation are not going to work. President, the deepening involvement of Iran, the DPRK, and Belarus in Russia's aggression against Ukraine must stop immediately. DPRK's continued large-scale supply of artillery shells and ballistic missiles to Russia, and the involvement of the DPRK's troops fighting on Russia's side in Ukraine are a major escalation with global consequences. President, we also urge China as a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council with a particular responsibility to uphold the purposes and principles of the UN Charter, to exercise its influence to end Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, providing indeed peaceful tomorrow for Ukrainians. In addition, recent reports of Russia recruiting cannon fodder from Yemen to fight in Ukraine only further displays Russia's escalatory course of action. It is highly alarming that military and mercenaries from all over the world are being recruited to fight in the heart of Europe to satisfy Russia's neocolonial and imperial ambitions. President, the developments that I and many around this table have highlighted only confirm that Russia's goal in Ukraine have not changed. They don't want peace, but to erase sovereign Ukrainian state from the map and root out the national identity of Ukrainian people. This is not going to happen. We will not allow this to happen. We will stand with the Ukrainian people and reiterate our unwavering support to Ukraine's right for self-defense and Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders. We call upon the UN membership to support Ukraine's peace formula, which is the only viable framework to secure a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in Ukraine, based on principles of the UN Charter. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Estonia for their statement, and I now give the floor to the Democratic People's Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Madam President. Only a week ago, here in this chamber, the draft resolution reflecting the unanimous demand of the international community for immediate and unconditional ceasefire in Gaza was rejected by United States veto. The result was the rise of the abnormal situation of the throwing into darkness and despair the Palestinian people in their aspiration for survival and abetting Israel's nefarious atrocity of the mass killings. However, UN Security Council laid aside the most pressing security issue at the present time when we witness tragedy of merciless killings that could even make Hitler blush with shame. Overwhelmed by a high-handed practice of the one permanent member of the Security Council, it has convened a meeting that completely runs counter to the fundamental principle enshrined in the UN Charter. Now, this is truly disgrace to be condemned by international community. I strongly denounce the United States and its following forces and are calling for this another illegal meeting, proceeding from their ulterior political motive to cover up the root cause of the outbreak and protraction of the Ukrainian crisis and deceive international community. As has been clarified on several occasions, the Ukrainian crisis was started by United States and Western forces that ignore legitimate security interests and the right to territorial integrity of Russia and pursued NATO's reckless eastward expansion under the ambition to maintain their hegemonic world order. It is none other than United States and Western forces that ruptured hard-won peace talks between Russia and Ukraine at the beginning of the event, and that caused and also the civilian casualty and prolonged the crisis by systematically supplying the various lethal weapons to Kiev authority, obsessed with a pipe dream to deal a strategic blow to Russia. Today, the Ukrainian crisis is plunged into all more grave and irreversible phase as present U.S. administration, nearing end of its term, has irresponsibly allowed the Kiev authority to strike area with Russia with the weapons supplied by it, and some Western countries followed suit. Ukraine invaded Russia's Kursk in August, the killing of numerous civilians, and recently, with public support from the United States and the West, it even went on to commit a dangerous crime of attacking Russian territory, using United States surface-to-surface missile ATACMS and UK air-to-surface cruise missile Storm Shadow. All facts give a clear answer to who is main culprit that further escalating Ukrainian war and aggravating tensions. Russia's counterstrike on November 21st is the exercise of the just and legitimate right to self-defense and served as a serious warning to the U.S. and Western countries in the war mania. The pressing issue to be addressed at the UN Security Council at the present is the act of undermining peace by the United States and its allies that are inciting confrontation and conflict among countries while running amok to strengthen aggressive alliance and arms buildup driven by their ambition for hegemony. Just as fascisms in Europe and Asia collude with each other to throw the world into turmoil in the last century, the reactionary forces in the West and the East today, allied under the buttons of the United States, are now attempting to establish rapacious and tyrannical order across the world. The United States in particular is expanding nuclear-sharing military alliance system while escalating military pressure and provocation against the DPRK through deployment of its vast array of the strategic strike munition forces of the allies in the vicinity of our state. Such being the case, the United States is still picking holes on legitimate development of the relation between independent sovereign states by mastering its satellite forces. It cannot but mockery of an insult to the UN Charter. Under the Treaty on Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, which fully conformed to UN Charter and international law, the DPRK and Russian Federation developing bilateral relations in all fields, including politics, economy, military, and culture, and maintaining contact with regard to each other's security and development of the situation. The DPRK will remain faithful to its obligation under the treaty and continue to strengthen and develop relations with the Russian Federation in order to defend fundamental interests of the peoples of both countries, contribute to regional and global peace and security, and realize international justice. The righteous international community should never tolerate such acts of the United States in its followers that infringe upon the sovereignty and disturb the peace in their attempt to obstruct development of the legitimate friendly relation between sovereign states and impose tragic war and catastrophic disaster. Rather, it should run out in the struggle to safeguard justice and equity, peace and stability. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea for their statement. The representative of the United States has asked for the floor to make a further statement. I give them the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I apologize for taking the floor a second time. I just wanted to make a very general point and ask a question, if I may. To be clear, the deployment of DPRK troops to help Russia carry out its illegal war of aggression against Ukraine and the Ukrainian people has fundamentally changed the nature of this war, posing not only a growing threat to Ukraine, but also an increasing threat to broader European security. The United States will continue to take, and its allies, to take all steps necessary to help Ukraine defend itself and to ensure allied security. And my last point is just a question to the representative from the DPRK regime. It's a very simple question, and I think this Council would appreciate a very succinct answer. Has DPRK deployed troops to Russia? Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of the United States for their statement. The representative of Ukraine has asked for the floor to make a further statement. I give them the floor.
Well, thank you, Madam President. I'm not going to comment the pulp fiction by North Korea edited by the Russian mission. But I forced myself to stay in this chamber out of respect to this institution and out of the need to look in the eyes of the representative of DPRK to tell him directly that he represents a criminal regime, that he represents the regime that helps another criminal regime, and that by the end of the day, sooner or later, you and your leadership will end up in the dock. And sooner or later, your people will be free, and then will enjoy democracy and freedom and liberty.
I thank the representative of Ukraine for their statement. The representative of the Russian Federation has asked for the floor to make a further statement. I give them the floor.
Спасибо, госпожа председатель. Сожалеем, что представитель США продолжает тратить ценное время Совета Безопасности на выслушивание его домыслов и очернение неугодных Вашингтону стран. Никаких доказательств никогда никем представлено не было. Это неизменно были рассуждения, типичные англосаксонские рассуждения в стиле highly likely. Мы уже неоднократно давали исчерпывающие пояснения, мы не видим смысла их повторять. Коллеги из КНДР сегодня также предельно четко изложили свою позицию. Имеющие уши да услышат. Если США и их союзники выбирают путь эскалации, а именно такой вывод напрашивается из их сегодняшних выступлений, где они постеснялись рассказать о реальной причине нового витка эскалации. Это зеленый свет, который западные доноры киевского режима выдали на использование дальнобойных вооружений против территории Российской Федерации. Если США и их союзники выбирают путь эскалации, мы к этому готовы. Но мы призываем все-таки обратиться хотя бы к остаткам здравого смысла и задуматься о том, что нужен серьезный диалог о необходимости искоренения реальных причин кризиса. Мы к этому всегда были готовы. Не готов был Запад. Поэтому, уважаемые западные коллеги, выбор за вами, весь мир ждет. Благодарю.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for their statement. The representative of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea has asked for the floor to make a further statement. I give them the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I want to take a floor to reaction to the comment made by United States delegate. It is a legitimate right for DPRK to develop the relation with the Russian Federation. The treaty on comprehensive strategic partnership between DPRK and Russian Federation is fully conformed to international law and the UN Charter. Therefore, the DPRK will remain faithful to its obligation under that treaty. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea for their statement. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. Before adjourning this meeting, as this is the last scheduled meeting of the Council for November, I'd like to express the sincere appreciation on behalf of the United Kingdom to the members of the Council and to the Secretariat for the support they have provided this month. We also thank the technical support team, the conference service officers, the interpreters, the translators, the verbatim reporters, and the security staff for enabling the Council to carry out its meetings. As we end our presidency, we wish the delegation of the United States good luck in the month of December. The meeting is adjourned.